My name is Jeff Williams. I am the head of Christian Aid in Wales. I was a church minister with the Union of Welsh Independent Churches for 17 years before coming to Christian Aid. And as a minister, I was a local organiser for Christian Aid. And the focus of Christian Aid was very important in my ministry. My ministry was very much in the mining valleys of South Wales, where the justice issues that Christian Aid embraces were also relevant in that context. And for me, moving to work for Christian Aid seemed to be a very natural thing to do. The justice focus of the Gospels are lived out in my work with Christian Aid. One part of my work, which is also a privilege, is that I get to travel to visit the work that Christian Aid does through its partners in some of the countries overseas. And my very first journey was to Latin America, to Central America, and to Honduras. And I spent some days in a village there with people who had been denied the right to live on their own land. They lived in the most beautiful and fertile valley you could imagine, and yet their children were ill, they were malnourished, because the food companies that owned the land would not allow them to grow their own food. And so they took a piece of land and grew food on there, and then they were thrown off that land. Some of the people were tortured, and there was a lot of suffering. And I met the people and expected that there would be anger and great hopelessness. What I found was completely the opposite. The people were full of hope, full of faith, and determined that they would one day have their own land and would be able to live on that land. And I met two young men in particular and asked them why they continued with their struggle, particularly because one of their group had been killed, had been assassinated. And Juan, this young man, took his Bible and opened the Bible to Isaiah 65 and read the words, "I am making a new heaven and a new earth," and spoke about the vision where people will live on their land, will eat the fruit of the land, they will live in their houses, they will be safe. And he said, because this is true, this is why we continue. This is why we will not give up the struggle, because this is true. And I found that very challenging, that faith and a belief and a hope could be so real, and that people would not give up. They believed that the victory was theirs already. It's good to say that in a few years' time after that event, they did get their land. And they were able to feed their children and send them to school and live in their houses. And that was very moving, and it's something that I carried with me over the 24 years that I've worked with Christian Aid. And that is something that is still an inspiration for me.